Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffees on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. When I started this passion project podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, where the guests also studied, I was genuinely motivated by three founding ideals. Number one, purpose of giving. Number two, learning from others. And number three, sharing of stories, which are aspirations still making up the content description. Admittedly, I often listen back to these long-form conversations to laugh at just how naive I was and am. But what gives me the enthusiasm and courage to host and share is a hopeful aspiration that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, can be a worthwhile pursuit. Just before we dive into today's conversation, I'd like to invite our listeners to join the community of 25,000 plus at coffeesonmedavidquan.com, where we kindly share legacy-worthy life, study, and career interview systems and resources flourishing our hero's journey. You can receive my gift repository and newsletter now, all free, all to pay forward my blessings. With over 100 legacy-worthy interviews and 100,000 plus downloads, this community is about giving, learning, and sharing together. Before I share the official biography, I also want to express my gratitude to those who made today's conversation possible. To Sharon Mills and the Wolfson President's Office for their thoughtful coordination, and to the Wolfson students and mentors who have supported our conversation. It means a great deal that we also have people far away watching. And of course to Sir Tim himself for the warmth with which he welcomed this conversation, and also since my time at Wolfson College in October. I am especially pleased to also continue an extraordinary season of conversations for the podcast, following my recent interview with Professor Santa Ono, who's the Global President of the Ellison Institute and three-time university president, alongside Dr. Arthur Laffer, the father of supply-side economics and a presidential medal winner, Dr. Mohammed Al-Arian, former CEO of PIMCO and president of Queen's College, Cambridge, Richard Verity, co-founder of the Osama Project and former McKinsey partner, Dr. Ali Lukes, viral Cambridge Scholar of Olfactory Ethics, Dr. Henrik Norjoks, Senior Partner and APEC Head of Financial Services at Bain & Company, and also Matthew Robb, who was former McKinsey Partner and now the new CEO of MCAT. But today's episode is one that I'm especially looking forward to. Why? Well, as someone doing an MSc in education here at Oxford, serving as the incoming president for postgrad of the Oxford University Students' Union and a member of Wolfson College myself, today's conversation carries a doubled significance for me. Recording this, at my own college with its president, amidst the natural beauties of Wolfson, and also, secondly, my late grandfather, Professor Ding Zuyi, actually founded Xi'an University in 1987, which is one of China's earliest private founded university, and believed that young people, his metaphor, young people are like water heated to 70 degrees, and with the right conditions, they too can flourish. And I find that today's guest has spent his life on a complementary question: how do you create the conditions where young people and communities can flourish? Sir Tim chairs Oxford Joint Committee on Student Mental Health, the institutional descendant of the COVID-era task force that he led, and a remit that sits directly alongside the one that I'm stepping into as the Students' Union president. We also share a Cambridge bridge. I read all of my undergrad degree at Clare College, whereas he read English literature as a scholar at Christ College, Cambridge. And in today's conversation, I also want to draw on the threads from across his career that I've wanted to ask for some time. There are also two details not in the official bio that I just want to name before we begin. Firstly, Sir Tim writes haiku in Japanese under the pen name Iryu, meaning English willow, and is the first head of house at Oxford to complete the university's LGBT plus allies course. Which is also more than a decade after he spoke at the Tokyo Rainbow Pride as British Ambassador in 2013 and 2014 in a country where LGBT rights were not protected in law. Both, I think, speak to the kind of leader that he is. So with all that as context for today's conversation, let me now share the official biography Sir Tim has approved, and then we will begin. So, Sir Tim Hitchens has served as President of Wolfson College, Oxford since 2018, following 35 years in Her Majesty's diplomatic service. Born in 1962, he was educated at Christ College, Cambridge, where he read English literature as a scholar and joined the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 1983. His postings traced an unusually broad arc. Overseas, Tokyo as third secretary in the late 1980s, Islamabad and Kabul as head of political section in the mid-1990s, Paris as deputy ambassador, and Tokyo again, this time as British ambassador to Japan from 2012 to 2016. In Whitehall, private secretary to the Minister for Europe, speechwriter to the Foreign Secretary, assistant private secretary to Her Majesty the Queen from 1999 to 2002, and successively European political director and Africa director. He concluded his Foreign Office career as chief executive of the 2018 Commonwealth Summit. Beyond Wolfson, Sir Tim chairs the Dawei Anglo-Japanese Foundation, which funds young people to travel to Japan, serves as a Commonwealth War Graves Commissioner, chaired the Special Committee to review historical inequalities in Commonwealth commemoration, and chairs Oxford Joint Committee on Student Mental Health. A Japanese language haiku poet whose collection Taiku was published in Japan in 2016, and the author of an essay on the Pakistani artist Ali Kazim for the Ashmolean Museum in 2022. He speaks Japanese and French at Foreign Office advanced level. He's married to Sarah, a psychotherapist, and they have 2 children, Gemma and Matthew. We're delighted to welcome you to Coffees on Me, David Quan.
Thank you very much, David. Yes.
How's your morning so far, and how do you find the atmosphere that we're recording in?
You know, we're so lucky to be living and working in a place like this. And sometimes when I'm meant to be working, I get distracted by this view because my office is just behind the camera, and this is the view I have every day. So it's a wonderful, relaxing area.
When was the first time you came to Wolfson College?
It will have been part of the interview process, and it will have been the day I came, probably in 2017, 2016,
Yep.
to be interviewed for the job. And I remember being completely blown away by the environment, also being blown away by the interview, because I had 60 members of the governing body sitting in one room, and I had to present to these 60 super clever professors, and then they fired questions at me. And at the end of it, I thought, yeah, I think I would like this place if they're going to give it to me. So yeah, it was great.
Well, I hope this is a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, much less intimidating.
I want to start with a question of yours, but return to you. I was really interested, obviously, by your time in Japan and speaking Japanese. You once said, I believe, do I use the female register, which brings with it a sort of differential tone, or do I use the bluff male tone, which is more demanding? For our conversation, which one are you choosing?
Well, I mean, I think that was particular to the Japanese setting, and luckily we're not in a Japanese setting, so I'll speak in a normal register, David.
So, you've mentioned that somewhere that you're not a linguist, but you clearly appreciate linguistic.
I mean, when I was at school, I did some languages, but never to extraordinary levels. And really it kicked off when I joined the Foreign Office when I was age 21, and they gave me 2 full years full-time Japanese learning. And that got me up to the ability to work at that level. And then later when I went to France, I learned French to the same level. So those are the 2 languages I'm competent in, but I'm not like a natural in the sense of you naturally have 2 strong, Chinese and Australian tradition that means 2 languages are natural to you, whereas I've only learnt them really as an adult, and that produces probably a different kind of language.
How did you learn them to such an advanced proficiency level?
I mean, on the Japanese side, really good teachers. We spent a year, there was a group of 3 of us learning at the same time. We spent 12 months at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London to get the basics, and then we went out for a second year in a place called Kamakura in Japan. And it's hard work. I mean, as you know, with characters, there's no way you can do that quickly. You just have to write and write and write and write. And then when you're learning a difficult language like Japanese or Chinese, you can spend a long time, you feel you're making no progress at all. And then you take a holiday and you come back and suddenly it's settled in your brain and you've made a big step up. So it was sort of slowly then fast, slowly then fast.
Wow. So speaking of Japan and your early exposures there, I believe that your father, Rear Admiral Gilbert Hitchens, he was the British Royal Naval Attaché in Tokyo. So he was posted there from February 1977 to February 1979 when you were 14, 15, 16. You said that in Japan in those years, quote unquote, your heart was grabbed. And obviously after Cambridge, you went back as third secretary, then as ambassador. You now chair the, the White Anglo-Japanese Foundation, and you also have written haiku in Japanese under the name English Willow, as we mentioned. So across nearly 5 decades, what is it that Japan has kept asking of you?
It's a big question. I think, maybe just 2 answers. One is, I think it is a very sophisticated country that is very different from Britain. And therefore, when I was young, I was trying to, you get used to the new culture, you find out the reasons why things are done so differently, and you get a very good insight into your own culture and its quirks and strangenesses. And you realize a Japanese person coming to Britain would think, what a weird place, and yet it does make sense in a curious British way, because that's precisely what you were feeling in Japan. You were thinking, it's really strange and different, but it makes sense and hangs together.
So did 14-year-old you feel like you were welcomed, and did you fit in? Was it easy?
I think 14 was a great age to arrive, because I think you're just mature enough to enjoy a challenging, different environment. And I guess until then, you quite like comfort. Whereas at the age of 14, you're ready for an adventure. You're ready to be thrown into something you don't understand. So I was ready for that, and Japan gave it to me in bucket loads. So many different things. And I guess also my personality has probably always been quite a sort of a curious, listening, not extrovert character. And I think those characters do quite well in Japan. If one is too extrovert and communicating always yourself, you sometimes don't pick up things. And so I think Japan is a place that repays spending time listening, and I think my character was probably quite good at that.
As you later learned in Paris, very different rules.
Very different rules, yeah.
So as an international student myself, I find that the early arrival where your nationality can be your personality. Like for me coming to the UK to Cambridge, people are all of a sudden asking me about kangaroos and big spiders and the weather, and they're not things that you usually talk about back home. Did you face a similar thing where you looked a little different, you came from somewhere different? What was people's curiosity of you and your country?
So I think it flows from, distant countries having tropes of what this country has. And so the fact that I had blue eyes, for example, and there are no blue eyes in Japan, that was very noticed. And a lot of cartoon characters have bright blue eyes. I think that people were obsessed with Britain being a country of gentlemen, and they were looking for gentlemanly behaviour somehow. They expected England to be full of fog and smoke, because that was still the image, and I had to explain that I hadn't seen much fog and smoke in my time, but I knew in the 50s and 40s and 50s and 60s there had been fog and smoke. So a lot of these things that you realise they bring lots of prejudices about you, but then you start thinking, and that means I probably have many prejudices about them too, and I need to work my way through those prejudices.
What were some of them?
Well, you have prejudices about the way some people dress in Japan. You have prejudices about people working very, very hard all the time, people living in tiny, tiny houses. And there's obviously an element of truth in all of these, but it's not the whole truth. And so it's separating out part of the truth from the broader truth of these places.
Did you know that it was going to be that set period of time that you would be in Japan, or was it more indefinite with your father's
Well, for that
work?
particular time with my father's work, I was in a boarding school in England. And so we'd go out for 3 holidays a year.
Dulwich.
So I was at Dulwich College in London. And so we'd go out to Japan 3 holidays a year. So I probably was there 6 holidays over a 2-year period, but all the time was holiday.
Yeah.
So that was my sense, was it was just a fantastic place to be on holiday.
And you were looking forward to going each
And
time.
I really look forward to going every time I went, yeah.
Did you have friends from that age that you would still be in contact with?
Yeah, I have several friends, Japanese friends from that time.
Yeah.
So there's one whole family where the parents knew my parents.
Yeah.
I then knew the 3 children.
Yeah.
And then my children know their children.
Oh, wow.
So there are 3 generations of that.
Yeah.
And my kendo teacher when I was there as ambassador was a very good friend I'd known when I was there age 17, 18. So layer upon layer of friendship,
Yeah. So your father, I believe, was selling Rolls-Royce engines to the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force.
Yes.
That's quite a specific kind of diplomacy.
Well, it is, but in some ways, you know, it's a big deal, and these things were very expensive, and the Japanese hadn't used our kit before, and therefore for them to buy a big British gas turbine, and it happened to be the thing he was the specialist in, that was the overall task he had, and he succeeded in that, which is great in 2 years. And I think he'd been selected to do that. But I think there was a broader point of building relations between Japan's Navy and Britain's Navy. He also travelled to Korea as well, so spent time visiting Korea, watching what was going on in Korea. So he had a very broad remit, but then this very specific task that he had to fulfill.
So, I mean, your father, you know, wore a uniform. You later on put on the suit for diplomacy. When you look back now, what do you think were the values that they were trying to instill into you? Like, what did you grow up in?
My parents. I mean, my father particularly was very determined that I wouldn't feel compelled to follow in his footsteps. So he had to have short hair and smart uniform, and so I was allowed to have long hair and never wore uniform.
How long did your hair get?
Well, a lot longer than now. But it was down to the shoulders. I mean, it was normal for the 70s, but it was quite sort of casual and relaxed. But the serious point is he had a sense of freedom to fulfill your own desires and not to do what your parents might have wanted you to do. I think he probably had parents, or certainly had a mother who had very clear ideas what she wanted of him, and he was determined not to do that with me.
I see.
So as a child and as a young person, I felt this very strong sense of freedom to do what mattered to me. So he was very happy I studied English literature, which is a great subject, but it doesn't lead directly to any job. But he was more than happy to let that happen. So I'm always very grateful to him for that freedom he gave me rather than direction of what I ought to do.
So it felt more liberating then?
I felt quite liberated, and there's a part of the reason he was doing this, the part of that is that he too felt someone who wanted to burst free of his uniform, and certainly when he retired, he grew his hair quite long when he retired, so he became a different person after retirement.
Did he teach you much about Japan, say, before the holidays? You know, I can imagine if you're going to take your child there, you would prep them on certain things about the culture, about the country, how to conduct yourself.
I mean, he gave us instructions on to what to do when we arrived, because we had an official car with a Japanese driver, and so he was telling me how to speak to the driver and what to say to the driver. He was really interested in history and really interested in Japanese culture.
Well read.
Very well read. So the holidays was a lot of travelling around Kyoto and Nara and learning about the history, the culture, the geography. So it was like an extended educational holiday.
So if I had the privilege of, say, access your report cards from Dulwich College, what kind of adjectives, like what kind of things would your teachers describe you as? Because I'm thinking out loud, right? The freedom that your parents are able to afford you must rest on some kind of foundation that you are responsible and mature and curious and seeking. So how did your teachers and peers describe you?
So they would have described me, there are two sort of sides to it. One would be very much to do with hard work, good grades, serious, effective. And then had been another that said, I remember very clearly saying, completely lacks leadership skills. And I had no ability to dominate or to motivate others. I was quiet and shy and hardworking.
So you led by example.
So, whose example?
You led by your own example.
I didn't lead at all, you see. At that stage, my father was a very strong military leader, and he ran expeditions and we would follow him. I definitely wasn't that kind of person,
Yep.
but I hadn't at school learnt how to do any of the other kinds of leadership. So my social and leadership abilities all came from the age of 21, 22 onwards.
Wow.
So I didn't really get those at school.
So you didn't really seek, say, to be school captain
absolutely
or prefect,
didn't
house
seek,
captain?
no. And oddly enough, it was an era, the 70s was an era that was quite countercultural in some ways.
Yep.
And I had no interest at all in any formal position. I was asked to be a prefect, and I didn't particularly want to be a prefect.
But they asked you.
They asked me.
That's a sign that they saw something in you.
Well, I think they saw the need to encourage me to learn these skills, which I didn't have. But I think I had them hidden because they came out later on. But they were, if you'd seen me aged 18 and seen me aged 28, two utterly different people.
So do you think that experience, and not to jump so far ahead now, but do you think that shapes your approach to education leadership, where you now see students who are perhaps more shy and more not taking the initiative, but you perhaps can see that they had the seeds in them, and if we nurture them and provide them with the resources and encouragement, that they would also blossom?
Absolutely. And well, you'll know this, David, but I look at someone like you clearly have the academic skills, but you also have all of the sort of the leadership, the motivation skills that will serve you very well in the world of work, or have served you well in the world of work. There are lots of people at university for whom doing well academically is all they've been judged on so far, and they haven't ever really understood that being academically outstanding will only get you so far in life. So I try as much as I can to say it's really good for you to organise a society or run a ball or have a campaign for such and such, because you'll learn how to lead, how to motivate, how to persuade. And I don't think our universities of themselves are naturally very good at that. And we sometimes do produce people looking for work, and workplaces don't want them because they don't have basic skills, workplace skills. So I think there is a little bit of that we need to do better on.
Something else that you've advocated for is you wish everyone would have a gap year, and you seem to have enjoyed your gap year. How did you come to the decision of taking a gap year before going to Cambridge?
So there used to be, in my day, the old days, a separate exam in what is Michaelmas term, so the autumn term, to get into Cambridge or Oxford the following September, October. And so anyone who did that, you took that exam in December, and then you had nothing to do until the following October. So we all basically had to have gap years. It wasn't a whole year, but it was 10 months.
Okay. Lots of the cohort.
All the cohort, because there was nowhere else to go to if you were doing that exam. So, and what it allowed you to do was, first of all, to go and do something extraordinary around the world that you had never done before, but also to appreciate how valuable university is, because, if you go straight from school to university, you don't quite appreciate how extraordinary the opportunity is. Whereas if you've had a year or so to do other things, you think, it'd be nice to go back now to read some books or to go to a lab or whatever it might be.
So you spent it teaching at a Japanese women's university. How did you arrange that? That's a lot of initiative and leadership skills.
Well, I mean, partly it was a family who I'd got to know when I was 14, 15, and their daughter wanted to come and live in Britain, and so we arranged a swap that I went to live with them and she came to live with us. And then the father of the family was a professor of English literature, and he worked at this women's university. And he was the one who kindly organised for me to go and work at that university. So, you know, can you imagine a 17-year-old young man going to an all-girls university? So it was a wonderful experience, yeah.
Wow. And what? So at that point, you'd already applied for English at Cambridge. So
I'd already got it. So I knew I was starting that following October.
And what was the motivation to apply for English? As you said, there was no direct end goal, but did you just trust that the Cambridge brand?
I did an interesting thing. I thought, if I'm good enough at English literature to get into Cambridge, then I'll study it.
Yeah.
But if I'm not good enough, I'll go to another university and do a more serious subject. So my second option was to go to Exeter University to study law. And luckily I was able to get to Cambridge and studied English, and of course realised that you don't need to do a subject that takes you direct to a job. You can use a subject that expands your ability to think and be coherent, and that's what English gave me.
It may actually be better, right? I mean, I was very curious on when you said about the difference between academic skills and professional skills. Do you think that the people who just focus on academia, they're simply missing out on that professional experience? Or do you think the very habits that help them to succeed in academics are the very habits that hinder them in the professional world? Like, is it mutually exclusive, or are they just two different worlds?
I mean, I think they're not mutually exclusive.
Yep.
And there are plenty of particularly young academics who there's just this side of them that they haven't really practiced. Yep. And if they practiced it, they'd have a wider range of opportunities within or outside academia.
Yep.
I think, though, that once you've been in one sphere of work, such as academia, perhaps for a long time, you do get a little calcified and you get stuck in your ways.
Yep.
And so that's why it's always good to try different worlds.
Different structures, different language, incentives. So at Cambridge then, when you finally got there, what kind of activities were you involved in, or was Christ that serious that you didn't get to do anything else?
Well, I did lots of sport.
Yep. Which ones?
Sorry?
Which sports?
So I did cricket, tennis, hockey.
You like being outdoors?
I like being outdoors. I did a little bit of rowing, but not all that much. I then did some acting and directing.
Yep.
And some writing. But I was also discovering love and emotions, and you know, as an 18-year-old arriving at university, I'd never had a girlfriend. You know, suddenly I was discovering life and discovering how one behaves,
and how popular you were.
And I wasn't very popular, but you discover, you know, both. You know, the trickiness is about relationships and also how wonderful they are. So that was probably quite an emotional experience learning.
Well, on that point, in one of the Wolfson videos, you've mentioned how the special character of Wolfson is that people are obviously graduates, a little bit older, and I think you said, like, on average, we might be more well-behaved. So conversely then, what in those undergrad years did you feel like you grew the most in? Which areas, and any formative kind of experiences?
Well, I mean, I suppose as a general point, I would say that undergraduate university experiences should do two things.
Yep.
One, they should make you ready at the end of it to get a job.
Yep.
But they should also, at the beginning of it, allow you to experiment with who you are.
Yep.
And to try out a number of personalities.
Yep.
And to try out a number of looks.
Yep.
And it's one of the rare opportunities in life when you're an independent adult, but you can try different sexualities, you can try different personalities, and there's not a lot of consequence of it. Whereas once you go into the world of work, it's harder to experiment with who you are.
The stakes are higher.
Yeah. So for me personally, I did a certain amount of experimenting with who I was, as well as towards the end, concentrating on getting a job.
But the intentionality to explore is already a great sign of maturity. Like, did anyone tell you about this perspective, that this is the time to do it, or you just inherently had that?
I think that I had worked out I was quite a shy and unadventurous young child. And yet when I went out to Japan age 17, and took my plane that took me to Hong Kong, and then I had to find my way from Hong Kong, I realised that for myself, running towards difficulty, trying things I was scared of, was a really good approach to life. And there's a very good quote by...
Obstacles the way.
Sorry?
The obstacles the way.
The obstacles, well, the other one I tend to use is John Milton, the English poet from the 17th century, who in slightly old-fashioned language said, that which purifies us is trial, and trial is by what is contrary. And so I sort of take that as being, you grow when you run towards danger and do things that you're not sure you can do, and then you overcome them, and suddenly life appears much easier than it would otherwise be. And certainly once you've done it for a while, there are far fewer things that scare you, because you've done all the things that would scare you already.
So what were they for you then, like, so the main ones in your life?
Well, I think the main scary ones were learning a difficult foreign language and living in a foreign country age 17. They were getting a job which sent me around the world, so I was having to constantly go to different countries, and each time I would arrive completely ignorant of where I was. I would have to spend the first 6 months just understanding what was going on. And then moving from one kind of job to another, where you think, I've got none of the skills to do this second job, and yet after 6 months you discover you have got those skills or can develop them. So I think my whole life has been jumping into places I thought I couldn't cope with, and then discovering I could. And the more you jump into difficult places, the better it is. And in fact, leaving the Foreign Service and coming to work at a university was actually slightly an intimidating thing for me, because I hadn't got a master's, I certainly didn't have a PhD, and I was being surrounded by professors. So that was an intimidating environment. So I think challenging yourself to go to difficult places.
And then the second purpose of undergrad, as you said, is to try to find a job. So when you pivoted towards that second goal of your undergrad, what were on the table? Did you still consider law? Did you consider putting on a uniform? Did you consider writing? Did you consider academia?
So I remember simply having 3 options. I mean, this sounds awful compared to young people having to make so many applications, but number 1 was the Foreign Office. Number 2 was the Hong Kong government. And number 3 was training as a teacher. And those were the 3. And the Foreign Office was one I really, really wanted to do, because I really, really wanted to learn Japanese properly. But the Hong Kong government seemed to me to be a fascinating thing to do.
How does that work? What does it mean to work for Hong Kong government?
This was pre-97, so this is the British Hong Kong government.
Okay, I see.
And one would have become a member of that government. I mean, it wasn't a very good long-term bet, but I didn't know that at the time. But it was a good way of, experiencing operating in Asia in a new situation, but learning some skills of operation.
Because you mentioned that when you finished at 21, you had a longing to go back to Japan. Do you think that was almost like, the seeds were planted by your early experiences, and you've gone through the stages of experimentation, and thereby you felt like, well, let me go back now and see if I can do things differently, or what was that longing?
I think when I'd been there age 17, 18, I had been welcomed by people, partly because I was speaking English, and they wanted to learn to speak English. So I didn't do a lot of speaking Japanese. And as I reflected on it afterwards, I thought, that's really something I should have done, and I didn't. So I was really keen to correct that and to learn Japanese properly. And then I'd looked at diplomacy and thought maybe my character suited that quite well as well. And that all led up to, so wouldn't it be great to join an organisation that took me back to Japan and would teach me how to learn Japanese? And that's probably the logic, and it was probably quite a short-term logic. It wasn't this is my 20-year plan. Thought, this is quite a good, sensible thing to do for the next 5 or 10 years.
You felt like you were growing, you were getting challenged, and you were learning.
Absolutely.
How was your time at SOAS?
SOAS was, it was great. We were in the same class as some undergraduates, and they were learning Japanese for the first time like us.
Yeah.
But you realised actually they were also busy having a lot of fun.
Yeah. They were experimenting.
They were experimenting. So after about 6 weeks, the three of us learning Japanese for the Foreign Office had just pulled way ahead of the undergraduates, because we were actually working all day and doing homework at night and practicing at the weekend.
Yeah.
So after 6 weeks, we actually were in a much better place than the undergraduates. So we ended up sort of operating in slightly different worlds, because we were sort of moving elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was great. I mean, it's a London university. For me, not as good as an Oxford or a Cambridge setting, but a great place.
So was that when you also maybe appreciated more of the collegiate structure of Cambridge then?
To be honest, I doubt I was thinking about it all that much. I mean, I think I was living in London, knew I was going to go to live in Japan after a year of this. I was having to sort out my private life because I'd suddenly realised that I did want to marry my girlfriend, but it was all getting slightly late in the day. So I had a lot of personal sorting out to do, as well as doing my Japanese.
Yeah.
So I probably wasn't thinking about the qualities of the university setting.
Yeah, fair enough. Is there anything else about Cambridge, those like that year of study before you went to Tokyo, third secretary, that you think is important in your story? Yeah,
Cambridge.
In those years of education, that was very defining, character shaping.
I mean, I think I realised I had two professors, one of whom hadn't really published very much, and one of whom was a brilliant publisher, speaker, known all over the world.
Yep.
And I realised that actually the person who hadn't published very much
Yep.
gave me a lot of time
Yep.
and helped me develop, whereas the brilliant person I thought I was admiring never did anything for me. And therefore I realised that caring for individual sets of students transforms their lives much more than somebody who's written brilliant books.
Wow, that's quite profound, right? Because, I mean, educators are often not always appreciated as much for the work that they do. So
And he certainly wasn't given the academic professional reward for all that work he did with us, whereas the other person was given all the rewards that you would get.
So broader then, if we extrapolate it, do you think that the academic institutions and the academia world has slightly, wrong incentives, or can it be altered in a way where actually we can better recognise it? Because again, from a personal career standpoint, if I spend this afternoon writing my paper and getting it published, that would add to my CV. But if I'm helping this shy undergrad, it doesn't always get seen. I guess conversely, you could say that, well, different people prefer different things.
Yeah.
But now as an educational leader in this space, how does that contrast and experience shape how you want academia to be?
I mean, I would say that there are meant to be three elements in academic progress. You're meant to do great research, you're meant to be a great teacher, and you're meant to be a good citizen and help administer the place. And so whenever academics are judged on progress, those three things are looked at. But the teaching element of it is generally perceived to be not at the top of that list. And the research element is always right at the top. And I think both the administration and the teaching elements should be given greater prominence. And maybe there should be slightly different ways in which you can progress in academia, but it probably doesn't give enough weight to teaching and administration as it might.
Do you have any ideas then?
I mean, each university is very different, and I know that some very clever people try to structure the administration in, say, an Oxford setting, but I also know that if you're going to give a lot of freedom to individuals to design their own careers, you want to be able to reward a brilliant researcher who discovers new cell structures, even if they don't do great teaching or administrating, because they have got a place. but you want to perhaps give the very greatest rewards to people who've got all of those things.
Wow. Do you feel like then with AI, the relative weight of what counts as professional knowledge is different? Like, I just written an essay where I argued that the current dominant framing around AI and education is around whether it automates or augments. Automating is like, well, can it do the admin work so that I can focus on more so-called high-value things? And augmentation is, can AI make my research faster and better and broader? But I actually think that AI is not just doing any of those two, but it's reconstituting what even counts as professional knowledge and what is valued. How do you see the incoming kind of 5 to 10 years with AI transforming the three purposes of higher education?
I mean, I do think you are probably, as a younger generation, better equipped to answer that question than I am, and I think the future is always uncertain. Certainly, if I look at what it's meaning for me, it is making things faster. It is good at challenging me. So if I put something down and I put it into an AI large language model, it can come back and challenge and point out mistakes I've made. But it's not affecting, I think, the key value I'm bringing to my job, which is something that AI can't do, which is sort of leadership and motivation and understanding and planning forward. So I think the jury is still wide open, and I think a lot depends upon our ability to use it as best we can. And I think in future we'll look back at the instructions we were putting into AI now and think they were so naive and simple, and it'll become an art in itself is how to put in questions into an AI model.
Interesting. We'll come back to your Wolfson and university leadership, but continue on your journey with third secretary, as I've researched, is the most junior diplomatic rank in a British embassy. So the context of the 1985 to 1989 era was that it was a bubble era Japan, stock and property prices reaching extraordinary highs, the Japan as #1 narrative dominating Western media. The Showa era was Hirohito reign. And that's also obviously encompassing the imperial expansion, Second World War, US occupation, post-war economic miracle, but his death in 1989 and the succession of Abihito, the Heisei era, was like a once in a 60-year era for Japan. So with the country going to formal mourning, but for you being a junior diplomat in Tokyo at that time, what was it like?
So I was lucky in that I arrived and Japan was in full boom. And as I left, it went through the great crash. And I left before the great crash had really rippled through the economy. And it's interesting what you say, because as you say, that Emperor Hirohito, his death sort of coincided with the end of that glorious period of the 70s and 80s. As a young person, you always want to be in a country, in a location which is very successful, which is growing, which is successful, which is dazzling. And I was very lucky to be in Japan at that period. And Japan felt it could do no wrong. It was, as you say, it felt as though it was going to take over the US. It was just a matter of time. It felt that there was some sort of intrinsically Japanese secret to why they were so brilliant. And then to see it all come down to ground afterwards as the normal forces of economic gravity operated, that was very chastening for the Japanese people. But for me, my memories of that period are all to do with the boom years. The fact that everyone in the UK wanted to know about Japan. We were having lots of visits by senior people in Britain. The fact that I could speak Japanese and knew about Japan. Everyone wanted to know why Japan did what it did. So you felt very much in demand. You felt very excited because you were aware things were happening. And it was at the end, when things started to go wrong, you felt there's probably a moral tale in there as well. But for most of the time it wasn't. It was just excitement.
I believe in a later interview in recent years you've mentioned how the second time you went back you felt the character of Japan was still the same, but Japan wasn't as confident as it was.
Yes, and I think in some ways the character had changed, because there was an arrogance in Japan in the 1980s that they knew the secrets of success, whereas when you go to Japan in 2010s, they know they don't know the secrets of success. You know, they're more modest about the limits of what they can know. And I think it's always attractive to come across people who know limits that they have and aware of limits. Whereas if you're not aware of limits, it's enthralling, but something's going to go wrong. Yeah.
So, as you said, right, when you arrived, it was booming. So did you kind of see yourself almost growing your career there, of how in demand you were? So every bit of experience and knowledge and relationship that you were building there, you must have felt like this was gold.
Well, it was gold. It was wonderful, and there was definitely a group of people who worked in the Foreign Office in Tokyo, learnt the language, worked there for 4 years, and then went and joined the private sector as their Japan expert. But I took the decision that wasn't what I was after. I was actually really interested in diplomacy itself and in building a career in the British diplomatic service.
Did you feel like that decision had sacrifices? Like, you know, would go into the private sector mean higher salary, quicker advancements? Like, did you work through and reason through the implications of what a diplomatic career meant at that time?
Yes, but I think I've never been all that interested in business and commercial work. So it wasn't a difficult decision for me, because I knew that my skills were not in commercial work, my interests were not in commercial work, that others were much better at that. And so I didn't really mind that they were earning 4 times more than me, because I couldn't do their jobs. And I thought I was really lucky because I was being paid okay. You know, certainly I still felt I was being paid much more than I deserved. And I was really interested in the work I could see embassies were doing around the world. So I had no problem deciding to stay in that world.
I see. So as the most junior person, what was the work culture like? Were you doing any, like, being drip fed work here and there? Did you know what you were going to do? Like, what was it like?
So the work, it's very well organised, and I was given subjects that were my subjects, and that I would connect to London and work for London. So one example, I was in charge of the Japanese aid programme.
Yeah.
And that programme had just grown very sharply, and they'd become almost the top spender in the world. And yet the rest of the aid world in developing countries didn't really know much about Japan's aid budget, and Japan didn't quite know how to spend its money effectively. So I became the key person between the Japanese aid administration and Britain's aid administration, working on projects around the developing world.
Broadly speaking, how do they differ in their style?
Well, they were at a different stage. So they were still focused on putting money into big projects of hospitals or schools. And they hadn't yet worked out that you needed to put as much effort into training doctors and teachers and the sort of human capital. And therefore they were keen to learn that, and they were making mistakes along the way, because the story of aid is always the story of mistakes and white elephants realizing you've done it wrong. And so we were trying to help them to learn, and they knew they needed to learn as they were learning how to be a great aid power.
That's so fascinating. Good use of your English degree.
Yeah.
So what got you back to London then?
So each time you're abroad, you have a term. So I had a 4-year term.
Oh, so you knew.
So I knew exactly when I was coming back.
Okay.
So I came back to London.
So were you doing long distance relationship at that time?
No, I had worked it out quite well. So I had, in that last year in the UK, I'd managed 4 months before going out to Japan to propose to a lady I wasn't going out with at the time, and she kindly said yes. So we got married.
So you weren't going out with at the time?
No, we weren't
but
going out with each other. Hmm?
You proposed to someone you weren't going out with?
Yeah, we had been going out before,
Oh,
and then we'd gone our different ways.
okay.
And then I proposed, and she said yes.
Wow.
So we had to quickly get married and organise travelling out there. So anyway, my personal life was settled by the time I got to Japan, so I didn't have to worry about that later on.
Wow. So you were very busy in that year then.
I was a 23-year-old with
And
lots to do.
still doing better than the undergrads. Okay, so then your family moved back.
Yeah.
Private secretary to the Minister for Europe.
Yep.
Then speechwriter to Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd. A private secretary in Whitehall is a senior civil servant who supports the minister directly, so handling correspondence, briefings for meetings, drafting decisions. The role is apparently, through my research, intensely demanding. Was that your experience?
It was brilliant, and I think it made you understand, or allowed me to understand,
Yep.
the way in which the democratic system works. Because you've got the experts who are there permanently, and you've got the politicians who come and go, and how on earth, but they're the ones who have the responsibility and the mandate.
Yep.
How on earth do you communicate what they want in language that they understand,
Yep.
that delivers on the ground,
Yep.
and how do you make these civil servants understand what it is the ministers want?
Yep.
And that's the key role, is communicating between those two and making things happen. And I was lucky enough to have a brilliantly interesting minister who was very entertaining, and our characters worked very closely together. And suddenly the world opened up, because up until then I'd been working on Japan and a particular aspect of Japan. And I then, with the minister, was having to work on all the policy on Europe, all the policy on Latin America, a lot of defence policy, and you realised how to make the system work, not just how to do your own job well.
That was like the foundation for then your later European director and Africa director work, right?
Yeah.
So that role was kind of a known launch pad for a senior career.
Yeah.
I guess there were other people also in the role, and not everyone would then make it. So I guess when you look back, arguably that's an inflection point on, do you then continue on the senior career, or do you kind of leave?
Yeah.
What do you think separates a good diplomat and a great diplomat, and who got through? Now that you got the benefit of hindsight, right, you know who progressed further and who didn't, but you also had worked with them at that level.
So there is an aspect of luck. So if you happen to be working in an area or a part of the world where a war breaks out or a crisis hits, and the opportunity of a crisis to rise to the top in a crisis, if you don't get that, then you don't shine. So there's luck involved. The people who are really successful also absolutely believe in the democratic system and don't believe in all this yes ministry stuff that the civil servants know best. They absolutely know that the politicians have the mandate, but your job is to find ways to deliver their mandate in practice, and that's where they're very good. And the third great thing is the ability to motivate your teams.
How many people were they leading then?
Well, see, when I was a private secretary, I only had 4 people I was managing. And then my first job, which had management, had 20 people. And then the next job, I moved from 20 to 100.
Very different skill set.
And you realise that with 20, you can actually manage them by just going around every day and talking to 20 people. But with 100 people, you can't manage by foot. You have to manage in other ways. And once you've got 100 people, you have to be leading as well as managing through working trusted people who you work for. But it also is how you communicate, because you need both a sort of a hierarchy of structure to get things done through layers, but you also need a sense that you personally are highly present and visible to every single person. So you
That
can communicate
sounds like
to everyone as well as through hierarchies.
That sounds like the leadership skill that teenager Tim had, leading by example, doesn't it?
I honestly don't think I had leadership skill as a child. As a teenager, it wasn't there.
So Douglas Hurd was Foreign Secretary from 1989 to 1995 under Thatcher and Major. In terms of background, Etonian, Cambridge, a literary Tory who wrote political thrillers and arguably one of the more consequential foreign secretaries of the modern era. It was also the same time where, the Treaty on the European Union was signed February 1992 and ratified in 1993, so created the EU as we know it today, introduced the euro, and was also deeply controversial, almost bringing down John Major's government. Speech writing for a foreign secretary is a position of enormous trust, and you have mentioned how it meant speech writing was all about getting rid of Tim Hitchens and inhibiting somebody else's mind. Could you please elaborate?
So, speech writing is great fun to do. You've got to carve phrases that are memorable phrases. But above all, you've got to be writing in a style that sounds authentic from somebody else. And there are plenty of people you could write a florid speech, but it would go down terribly because it wouldn't fit the person.
Yeah.
And so in order to do this for someone, you really have to get to know them very well. You discover their trademark turns of phrase. You know the kind of themes that keep coming again and again.
Yeah.
And so I just had to get into his character.
Yeah.
So there were always two parts to a speech. One was, what are the points he wants to make? And the other is, and it's got to sound as if it's him speaking. And as I think I've said somewhere else, there's a point after doing it for a year when you do long for the day where you can think for yourself again. So I did it for about, I think, a year and a half or so.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I loved it. I thought I'd done it quite well, but it was time to become Tim Hitchens again. So I became Tim Hitchens again.
Because you mentioned you were like an actor, right? And
Yeah.
when I was in London, one of my favourite things to go to was the musicals. And I've always had great admiration for those actors who were playing musical characters, because even though they're similar to, say, a professional basketball player, I felt as a basketball player you're still being yourself and you're reacting to the moment, whereas as a musical actor, every night for 6 nights a week you are trying to be someone else and repeating the same thing. And what the audience finds funny and spontaneous is that what you don't find spontaneous is you know it. And I guess speech writing seems to have some similar parallel, but you're not in front of someone. Like you don't always then get the credit as well. Right? You will be writing, producing, then
And I suppose you do know, you do discover about yourself whether you are the kind of person who wants credit or not. And I didn't really motivate me in any public sense having credit. That wasn't part of what motivated me. But I also think that everyone in a leadership position is acting. And that to do it well, you need to be acting, and being professional, you're acting, which is not to say you're pretending to be something you're absolutely not.
Yeah, but polishing it.
But you are polishing something, you're doing it on behalf of an organisation or a client
with
or
good
whatever
intentions,
it may be.
generally.
And therefore, the ability to, and even running a college, to an extent, I am having to be a certain kind of person that encourages people, that listens to people, that acts as a model. And I probably want to be back home watching TV or being in the garden, but that's not what I'm paid for. I'm paid to be professional. So I think it's probably clearly it's true of the speech writing profession as well as the acting or even the basketball, but it's true of any profession.
Yeah. So when you've done it for a year and a half, even though you still came out as yourself because you knew you were acting and you knew that you were learning in the context, but what part of him and the role do you think you had then learnt and adopted as yours?
Yeah, I mean, he was a brilliantly rigorous thinker, and so I was more rigorous in my thinking and the way I described
You
things.
had to justify everything, step
to justify
by step
everything.
by step.
But also, as a politician, he'd shown me the way in which crafting a single phrase, that phrase could capture a truth that then lasted for years as a phrase. And there was a phrase he invented, it wasn't me, but it was punching above our weight, which was a phrase that he gave in a speech a year before I arrived. And then that was a phrase that just kept on going.
Common now.
Quite common now. That's Douglas Hurd, and it specifically described Britain's sense of itself at that point when it was no longer a great power, but was able to act in a way more significant than its actual power might suggest.
So you didn't write that?
I wish I had. It was a very good phrase, but that was the kind of thing I was longing to find. And I had some, but I mean, that was a classic example of a brilliant one.
So that's kind of anticipated. I was going to ask you essentially what's some of the more like Hurd-like sentences that you've wrote, but also conversely, are there any like unheard-like that you've had to cut that you felt was good?
I mean, there are moments when I have injected a certain amount of emotional intensity into a speech. And I think with Douglas Hurd, he was very restrained and rigorous.
Yeah.
And so there were probably some of those phrases that disappeared. I mean, to be honest with him, what was brilliant is that I didn't really need to write the beginning and the end of any speech. Because those are always the most difficult parts of a speech, because you have to understand who is in the room, what's the mood in the room, are they hostile?
So he didn't want to outsource that.
He just would do those on the spur of the moment. He would know who they were and he'd introduce it, and then at the end he'd know how to bring it to an end.
Yeah.
So I provided the bulk, but he would do the either end.
I see. So your next big stage, I believe, is head of political section in Islamabad. So that is the senior political affairs officer in embassy responsible for analysing the host country's politics, reporting to London and managing a relationship with government, opposition and civil society. In terms of context, as I understand it, the embassy in the mid-1990s also covered Afghanistan because there was no permanent UK embassy there at the time. Pakistan in 1995 to 1997 was also Benazir Bhutto's second government, with deep tensions between civilian leadership, the military and also the ISI intelligence service. What was it like then to be in a very different environment, taking on the challenge? So
my motivation for applying for that job was quite personal, which was that we had two very small children. My father-in-law was British Pakistani, and both my wife and I wanted our children to grow up knowing Pakistan not just as the strange culture of her grandpa in Manchester, but as a country, as a culture, as people. And we had plenty of relatives and family out there as well. So that was sort of the motivation to get out there. But when we got there, it was such a wonderful experience because there were lots of problems, and so the work was
the opportunity in crisis.
The opportunity in crisis. And so the kind of problems there were, you had the emergence of the Taliban in Afghanistan to deal with. We had the Indians and Pakistanis who were fighting over Kashmir. You had nuclear weapons being developed in India and in Pakistan. You had missile development, and you also had the emergence of terrorism across Pakistan. And all of these things were very interesting to people in London because they posed problems and challenges to people in London. And so for me, I was found it fantastic, because I'd be travelling around the country.
High in demand again.
High in demand, people wanting to know what was going on, having a certain amount of influence as well.
Yep.
And there was a particular occasion when, for example, a number of British hikers had travelled up into the valley of Kashmir from the Indian side against Foreign Office travel advice, had been kidnapped by some militants who had taken them over to the Pakistan side, and they had probably been killed, but we weren't sure.
Yeah.
And we had the families wanting to find the traces of their loved ones.
Wow.
And just supporting those families and travelling with them up into Kashmir and meeting the militant leaders and hearing their truths and their lies. You felt that you were really doing on the ground stuff that mattered to individual British people.
So you would have been, writing some of the earliest assessments of what the Taliban was and what the rules were, and as you mentioned, how people back at home were interested in learning more. What did you think the embassy knew more than people back in London did by being on the ground?
Well, on the Taliban side, our main interest in Afghanistan at the time as the British government was that 90% of the heroin on streets of London, the UK, came from Afghanistan. And the Taliban had said they were against the production of heroin. So there was an immediate opportunity. We may come from very different contexts, but if you want to stop the production and we want to stop the production, can we help you stop the production? So there was that early period where we were working very closely together. I guess what you knew on the ground was you could judge that though they were saying they were interested, they didn't have any other sources of money, and that pretty soon they'd need the money, and they would probably give up on all of that, stopping the drugs.
For pragmatic
reasons. And we also were learning that people like Osama bin Laden were moving to Afghanistan, and they posed a significant terrorist threat. So the connections between the terrorist threat growing and the prospect of drugs reduction dropping meant that you could advise London that this was probably not going to be a friend relationship at the end.
Wow. So did you feel like then, given those challenges and the growing nature of it, that your sense of duty as a diplomat was at an high, right? Because you realise that your actions and your embassy's work can really affect the developments of the world and humanity.
Yes, I think in any job, there are moments when you ask yourself, what's it all for and why are we making any difference? Are we making any difference at all? And then there are moments when you suddenly remember, this is why we do it and why it's so good.
Yeah.
So that was one of the good examples when you thought, diplomacy is actually making a difference today. And if we weren't here, things would go wrong. And we are here, and we can make things go better.
Was it a rules-based order or a power-based order?
Well, it's never been either or both. It's been. I remember when I was very young and joined, I was told, look around a room, work out which is the lion, and give them the lion's share, which is basically power-based. But there is a way to have power-based, but in what's called a rules-based structure.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you look at the UN Security Council, you've got whatever the number of members there are, they all have a vote. But there are 5 of them that have a blocking vote.
Yeah.
And they are the permanent members, because when it was founded, they were the big lions.
Yeah.
And in the European Union, we all have a vote, but the Germans and the British and the French had a bigger vote than everybody else.
Yeah.
And the Luxembourgers a smaller vote because they were the lions.
Yeah.
So I think probably in those days there was both a rules-based system, but the rules did allow the bigger players to get more power. And I suppose that's the nuance that perhaps is sometimes lost.
So in 2022, your Ashmolean essay on Pakistani painter Ali Kazim, South Asia opening our eyes to ourselves, Is that a quiet return to that period of a place that you've observed politically, but now you're seeing it through a more cultural lens?
I mean, I definitely, I mean, he's a wonderful painter, beautiful painter of portraits of people in vivid colours. I think that, as I say, my interest when I was in Pakistan was both the professional side and the personal side, and the connections between the British Pakistani community and the Pakistan community are so close and so intense. If you look at somewhere like Oxford, the largest minority ethnic group is Pakistani. So these communities are everywhere, and they make what it is to be British nowadays. And Ali Kazim was a very good example of someone who lives and works in Lahore in Pakistan, but came over here and connected, made us realise that we as a nation, as a British nation, are not just white people, we are a whole range of communities.
And by the time you finished your time there, did you feel like your children had a good grasp? Like, have you achieved the objective of exposing them?
Yeah, I think they feel very positive about Pakistan. They feel very positive about Islam.
Yeah.
And I think if anyone is ever rude about Pakistan or South Asia or Muslims, they're very quick to defend them.
So one of the more difficult parts of my job as an interviewer is, the dual responsibility of, on the one hand, facilitating the sharing of your story so that it becomes meaningful for you to achieve a legacy-worthy interview, but on the other hand, respecting boundaries, professional boundaries, personal boundaries. I'm just going to move to your years in the Queen's Office, which I understand some things may be able to be shared, some things may not be able to be shared. So let's work together to navigate what is important but also public. An assistant private secretary to Her Majesty the Queen in a 3-person private office. For context from my research, I didn't know this before, the Queen's private office is the most senior advisory unit in the royal household, directly serving the sovereign. The private secretary is the most powerful non-elected official in the United Kingdom. The deputy and assistant private secretaries are the second and third positions. The 3-person office advises on every aspect of the sovereign's duty: state visits, audiences with the Prime Minister, official correspondence, ceremonial events, and almost no diplomats serve in that role. It's typically filled by the most promising mid-career officials across the civil service. Interestingly, your tenure there covered the Golden Jubilee preparations marking the Queen's 50th year on the throne, celebrated 2002, and also the death of the Queen's mother, Elizabeth Bow-Lyon, the late Queen's mother, on 30th of March 2002, aged 101. The entire country went into national mourning, with her funeral attended by an estimated 1 million people. You've spoken about this only in glancing terms publicly from my research, so...
Well, I mean, what I would say is that if you are given the privilege to work really closely with such an extraordinary figure, then you have an obligation to that person forever afterwards to respect the privacy.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell any sort of nasty stories.
Any positive?
But plenty of positive stories. I'm very happy to tell positive stories. So the way this all happened is that when I was in Pakistan, there was the 50th anniversary of the independence of Pakistan, and the Queen came out on a state visit for a week to Pakistan, and I was the director of that visit. And I think at that point we got to know each other, and her team, we got to know each other. So when a position opened up, they asked if I was interested to apply, and I was lucky enough to be accepted. I was interviewed by the Queen. I've never really been much of a dog person, but I was interviewed by the Queen, and she was sitting down and I was sitting opposite her, and the corgis, her little dogs, were running all around. And I'm not a great one for patting dogs, but I deliberately took the corgis and gave them a nice stroke, and I think that's probably the way I got in. No, so it was the most extraordinary. She is a remarkable lady, was a great knowledge of all of those great times in history. So you talk about Emperor Hirohito having seen a lot of history. She had seen a lot of history as well. A great sense of humour, so if anything went wrong, she would laugh it off, which was wonderful when things did go wrong, because they would go wrong. And I was involved just after the death of Lady Diana, and worked there through till the Golden Jubilee in 2002. And you'll remember that the death of Lady Diana and the way in which that was greeted by the British public, that clearly created problems for the British monarchy, which they were determined to address. And I was therefore there during that process of addressing that challenge of how do you connect again to the British people. And I think when in 2002 you saw her glorious celebrations then, I think it was very clear that she had moved into a status of being the nation's grandmother, and she could do no wrong from then on. So it was a really interesting period to be part of that team, and to have the privilege of being involved in both the public duties, which were what I was in charge of, but also being there in Scotland or in Sandringham or wherever they were for private times as well.
Did you feel like that after that experience, when you then read or even watch films and documentaries about the royal family, the public had misconceptions about the Queens, or was there a general sense of misconception having now worked there?
I think my personal view is that monarchies work well if there's a certain mystery about the monarch, and that monarch can be attributed with lots of different aspects of personality by different people who want different things, and that the Queen was really good at preserving that professional mystery while being charming and thoughtful and easy to get on with, etc. But she kept things to herself, and I think that's a really important part of being...
It's actually very difficult. She couldn't be open, and she can't be understood.
Can't be understood. And also, if you're a politician, if you're lucky as a politician, your career lasts 15 years, and you rise and you become something and then you retire.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're the Queen, if you're the King, you know, it's for life. And so the public scrutiny is there for life, and designing the way you live, if you're being scrutinised all life long, is a very different proposition than if you're a Prime Minister who has a really public, powerful period and then disappears off and is forgotten. And they're never forgotten.
Wow. And did you feel that pressure then, being one of the more discreet places? Like, were you worried about, you know, maybe not safety, but definitely like confidentiality? Were you like, how did you have to change and evolve your own conduct and mindset in order to thrive in that environment?
It was quite natural. I mean, I think I've always been a very discreet person. I've not been somebody who gossips or passes things on. So I don't think I found it all that difficult to keep secrets or to be trusted to keep secrets.
I see. And in September 2022, when King Charles took the throne, you'd obviously served his late mother. Do you remember the day when he took on, and I guess without revealing anything private, but did you feel anything special given that you've had that experience?
I think when you become the monarch, you suddenly owe everything in your life to your nation and the people you're representing. Whereas when you're not yet the monarch, you have got certain freedom to express your own personal views on things. And certainly as the Prince of Wales, he'd expressed his views on a number of things when he was younger in his middle age. But he really wisely, as his mother became older, he also became more discreet. And then when he took the throne, he's become completely discreet. and I think I admire that about him. I know he's got strong personal views about a lot of things, but he's closed those down in order to be a good king, and I think that's admirable.
Wow. Anything else about your time there that you want to capture in the interview, or else we'll move to Paris?
No, lots of things, but let's keep going.
Great. So 3 years in Paris, deputy head of mission or deputy ambassador, number 2 position in an embassy, typically, as I understand from my research, running day-to-day operations while the ambassador handles the most senior relationships. Paris is one of the most senior diplomatic posts in the British network. So your tenure covered the Blair-Chirac era, deep tensions over the Iraq War, but also Anglo-French defence cooperation, the EU constitution debate, and France hosting of the 2007 Rugby World Cup. Interestingly, the cultural codes of French diplomacy, formal, argumentative, philosophical, are different from Japanese, where silence and indirection carries meaning, and you have been quoted in previous interviews saying it's the exact opposite. And there was even an anecdote about a wedding gift that we can or we cannot talk about. How different was it, and how did you learn the differences?
Well, I'd say that this goes back a little bit to my running towards difficulty. I'd always been intimidated by French diplomats because they were so professional and they were so structured and intellectual in the way they approached problems, whereas British diplomacy was all about being flexible, being pragmatic, having rules, but then you broke the rules if it felt more important to achieve something, whereas the French approached things in a very structured way. And I also knew that when we've been in Japan, you can speak average Japanese and the Japanese love it because you're trying to speak Japanese. Whereas in France, unless you speak impeccable French, it's not quite right. And that was my attempt to sort of overcome my hesitations about that. I think that the irony is that precisely because the British and the French, so one of the odd things about the British and the French is that they are so different in their approach to problems, their culture. Over the centuries, we've defined ourselves in such opposing ways to each other that if you can actually get something where the French and the British agree on something, you can often, or you certainly could then, carry that initiative through across Europe. And so others would say, well, if you and the French can agree on this, we'll do it. So a lot of what we were doing in Paris was working with the French, knowing that precisely because we saw the world very differently, partnership between us could be globally significant.
So it's in those years that you learned French?
Yes, so I had about 6 months before going out to Paris when you have to speak a little bit of French in order to read French to be a diplomat, but actually getting to the point where you can have conversations properly and conduct business. So I did that just before then.
I see.
And then went to live with a family down in Brittany and learned French there.
So from the interests of the British government or embassies, diplomacy, what's the incentive of appointing you, not saying you're not competent, but as someone who were in Asia and Pakistan, why send you to Paris? Is it the belief at the time that in order to develop the future leader, you should get exposed to different stuff?
Yeah, I think the Foreign Office was probably is still quite broad-minded in the sense of it's trying to create really good, excellent all-rounders.
Yeah.
And you have to design your own career a bit more nowadays, but I definitely designed my career around not wanting to become known as the person who does just one thing.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be known as the person who could do East Asia, Africa, Europe.
Yeah.
And so I made sure I did all three of those.
So what happened at the wedding? Like, how did you make the mistake of the wedding?
This is in Japan.
Yeah.
So shall I tell the story? So it's essentially in Japan, when you go to a wedding, people give cash as the gift.
Yep.
And you put the cash in an envelope, and you give it, not handing over the cash, but handing over the envelope.
More grand envelope than your amount.
But I used, exactly. So I gave something like 20,000 yen, and I gave a 100,000 yen envelope, and afterwards realised what I'd done.
That's not that bad.
It's an easy mistake to make, but it's completely mortifying when you realise that's what you've done.
I think that's very forgivable.
Well, they have separate ones for funerals, so at least I didn't put it in the funeral one. Yeah.
For sure. Okay. So in Paris, how do you feel like Paris, those 3 years have changed you at that point? Because you would have been quite established as this isn't like your Cambridge years where you're exploring yourself.
So that was the place in which I learnt a really important skill, which is there are some beliefs about yourself that serve you really well in one phase of your life, but hold you back in another phase of life. And until that point, I had been a really good chief of staff to somebody else, advisor to somebody else, but there'd always been somebody bigger than me
Making the decision.
making the final decisions, and I was supporting them. And I reached a stage where that wasn't a helpful belief, that was who I am.
You had to be decisive.
And I had to be the one who was taking the decisions, bearing the responsibility, and that was a change of personality required of me. And that was probably where I was able to do it.
It's a fascinating question, though, you know, like for everyone here at Wolfson, right, or in university, you know, what skills have worked well in high school but perhaps don't work well at university, and likewise, what are we good at now that we need to unlearn, relearn, and learn going into the workforce? I mean, a very deep, fascinating question.
All of us have beliefs about ourselves, of who we are, that we believe we've learnt about ourselves and are therefore true, but they may have been true about ourselves a while ago, but they can solidify into beliefs that hold you back. I think the other thing is that as you go through a career, for the first half of your career, you believe that you're accreting, adding to your skills of what you're doing, but you're not having to leave any of them behind. Whereas you reach a certain point in your career where if you try to keep on doing all these things, you'll never have the time
to be an expert.
You can't be an expert anymore. And so you have to stop doing the stuff that your whole career has been built on you being good at in order to find time to do all the other stuff that you may not actually feel yourself to be so good at. And this is a point where a lot of people mid-career fail to let go of stuff, and that holds them back.
One step back, two steps forwards.
Yeah.
Wow. What did you have to give up then?
So I had to give up expertise. I had to give up knowing more than anybody else about something. There were always going to be people who knew more than me about any specific item. I had to give up the comfort of not relying upon anybody else. You become completely reliant on other people, and that's quite scary. But you then learn that you have to spend vast amounts of energy making sure the people working for you are really good people, and at the heart of it is making sure that they are brilliant, and if they're brilliant, then you're going to be okay.
Got to empower others. So then the next stage seems to be a very kind of big step up for you. 2 senior director roles in succession. Firstly, European responsibility for 41 European posts, and then Africa, and you know that's Britain's relations with the entire continent. I didn't really know much about the diplomatic career side as I did my research. As I understand, correct me if I'm wrong with anything, but director in the FCO is a senior management position responsible for an entire geographic region, one level below the permanent undersecretary, which is the FCO's top civil servant, and above the ambassadors and high commissioners in each country. So the European political director coordinated UK policy across all 41 European missions during a turbulent period. The 2008 financial crisis, sovereign debt crisis, that was my area, but giving up the expertise gradually by coming to Wolfson. The rise of Euroscepticism. And before we move on to Africa, so I guess how did you find taking that step up, and what different skill sets did you have to make when you're managing 41 European posts in that turbulent time?
I mean, you pretty soon realise that you're going to manage people who are older and more experienced than you, and you think, how on earth am I going to do it? What right do I have to do this? But you realise that they actually do want direction from you.
Yeah.
And I remember being told, use the phrase, what I expect of you is, and then say something to them.
Oh.
And that was a phrase I hated to use because it kind of sounded really presumptuous. But actually, if you are in a position of authority, it's your job to make sure somebody else knows what success looks like to you. And somebody may be 10 years older than you, but actually you're in your position for a reason. And therefore, so long as you're clear that you trust them to do their thing, but you are giving them direction, they do want to follow. And I found that quite liberating, because I'd thought that they would all say, why should I? And then you'd say, this is the way it's going to be. And they'd say, okay, let's make it happen.
Wow. That's really interesting, because even maybe now at the business school or elsewhere, they would maybe avoid like what I expect is, but rather reframe it, say, as a question of, what do you think if we did this? Whereas
I mean, there's a time for that, and if you've got people you're really having to persuade, but if you've got an organisation, it's a professional organisation that believes in the hierarchy, you're given the responsibility to deliver things for your minister who wants them done. And if they're sitting overseas and they're not in London,
ambiguous, and if they're not sure, then
you can't say, if you'd like to do this, what do you think about that?
Yeah, then they won't take it.
They won't take
seriously,
it.
Yeah.
And they're grown-ups as well, so they want clarity from you.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I guess the context does matter, I would imagine.
And it's a little bit what you're doing is you're telling them where you want them, what you want them to achieve.
Yeah.
They're the ones who decide how to achieve it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like in a military setting.
Yeah.
You say to somebody, that hill we need to capture.
Yeah.
You decide how to capture it. And actually for the person capturing the hill, that's a big task and a really interesting task. And when they do it, they feel brilliant.
Yeah.
And all you've done is set them the task.
Yeah, the direction. I see, wow. So did you feel out of your depth then in any other regards in that time?
I mean, my experience of any job is the first year you feel out of your depth. And if in the first year you feel on top of it, then it's the wrong kind of job because it's too easy for you.
That's not good for me with my upcoming presidencies, only 1 year.
Maybe 6 months in your case. But I think that, basically, a certain amount of nervousness and lack of confidence is a helpful incentive to get you to learn hard.
Yeah.
And it's not a problem.
Yeah, I see. So then the Africa Director 2010 to 2012 handled UK relations with all 54 African states. The Arab Spring, South Sudan's independence in 2011, the Libyan civil war and persistent challenges around development, terrorism and trade, cross-region transitions at director level are unusual, and moving from Europe to Africa in 2 years would have again meant a near complete rebuild of expertise, which you seem to thrive at. But what instigated this move, and was this what you wanted as well?
It's definitely what I wanted. I went for it. In fact, every job I've done, I've gone for and lucky enough to get. So I think in Africa there were so many things there was so much suffering, and so many problems, and you can live a charmed life moving around Tokyo and Washington and New York and Paris and London, and you understand half of the world's issues but not the other half. And I felt I couldn't really understand the way the world worked without having a first-hand sense of how a continent like that could operate. But it did mean I was in war zones a lot, and seeing the aftermath of terrible cruelty and aftermath of terrible suffering. So it wasn't a time that I go home to my family and tell them what I'd been doing, because you were dealing with a lot of really bad, tough stuff. But it gave you a strong sense of how the world really is. And it's made me a bit impatient of people who believe the world should be a certain way, and they don't understand that for most people in the world it's a different way. And
it has to be a different way because of
and it's not saying you don't believe in progress and need to improve, but there's just lots of suffering out there, and lots of people making the best of their lives in really difficult circumstances. And you sometimes then feel ashamed to be living in a country where people complain that the television channels have changed or something. You just think you have no idea how the world works.
Wow. So perspective then.
Real perspective.
Wow. Did you have like dissenters in your office who really just disagreed with how you, either your views or how you went about the dealing of all those crises and problems?
I mean, I think people would say that my method mislinks to sort of how you listen, leadership and listening, is that I would very rarely come to a problem with a view on what the way forward was. So in a typical meeting, the first half of the meeting, you'd be encouraging as much dissent and perspective and difference as possible to understand the full range of options and what was happening. And then the second half of the meeting is deciding what you do about it. And so I definitely saw my role as listening to the experts and then helping us collectively to come to a common conclusion. So I would very rarely come at an issue with a perspective that I knew how to deal with it.
Which is good leadership, because if you were the first person to speak, then people would be incentivized to just follow you and it would be an echo chamber, whereas when you don't speak, it gives them the openness and the space to share the diversity of viewpoints.
It's one of the great lessons and skills is how to know when to come into a meeting, whether you want to come in straight away because you want to set the tone, or whether you come in halfway in order to turn the angle of the conversation, or whether you can actually leave it to the end when you summarize it. And there are times when you need to do all three of those things, but
And by the time you finished that, you probably had one of your favorite roles ever, Tokyo as ambassador. So British ambassador to Japan from December 2012 to January 2017. So that is one of the most senior FCO appointments. Japan is a G7 ally, a major UK investor, and also one of Britain's most important non-EU partners. Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated in 2022, at that time was Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister. His second term, December 2012 onwards, launched Abenomics and brought UK-Japan relations to their closest level since World War II. So when you had the chance to go for this job, your expertise in Japan was not as current as it was, but you also had the benefit of that history in Japan. What made you want to go for this job at that, given the macro context at the time?
I think it was pretty obvious why you'd want that job. I mean, what a brilliant job and a great location and going to be very interesting. And I guess I was lucky in that, as you say, I wasn't up to date with Japan, but I was really well plugged in with the way London viewed the world, and lots of people in London. And so I guess the office had a choice between someone like me, who I was absolutely attuned to what London was thinking, but didn't have recent expertise,
Yeah, but you can
or
develop.
another candidate who might have known it very, very well, but maybe wasn't plugged into London. And luckily for me, I was chosen.
So, as the European director and Africa director, where were you primarily based?
The office was London,
Okay, so
and
you
then
lived in
travelling a
London.
lot. So I lived in London
Okay.
and travelled a lot out into the countries.
Wow. Did you like the element of the logistics of travelling? Like,
Nope.
no.
I mean, particularly travelling across time zones is not fun, and then travelling overnight
Yeah.
on economy flights is not much fun. So the travel wasn't the best bit of it.
What did you do on the plane or at the airport? Like, did you develop new routines, new skill sets?
I developed skill sets of sleeping, in uncomfortable
I was
places.
expecting reading the FT, the Economist.
No, I've always been terrible at working on airplanes. I go into a zombie state and I sort of, sleep and read trash.
I guess a lot of my friends, they're in management consulting. The first few years of their life is a lot of traveling, and they say like the first year was the most exciting thing, where you see different places, and then later on it becomes quite a disruptor to quality of life and standard of living.
I mean, arriving in all these different places, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
But it's the flying there and back is not much fun.
Yeah. Okay. So then with this role, then you obviously have to move to Japan.
Yeah.
And you obviously set up your very famous and popular Twitter account.
Well,
UKM's Tim.
The story was that the Foreign Office had a practice almost of saying, to be a professional, you leave your personality at the front door and you come into the office and you are the Foreign Office individual.
Yeah.
And that round about 2009, 2010, people started to think, this is excluding some really valuable aspects of people's personality. So please bring your personality in to work. And then when you become an ambassador, having been anonymous because you're an official and the ministers are all the ones in public, suddenly you have to have a big public persona. And it's really tricky for people who've been discreet and under the radar suddenly to need to get as much public attention as possible. But that's part of the job. And therefore Twitter was a new thing at the time. So I then started doing a lot of Twitter and then started writing Japanese poems in my Twitter feed, and that that was part of it.
So on those Japanese poems, you wrote under the pen name
Eiryu.
Which is English willow.
Yeah.
So of all the things in Japan, why a willow?
Willow in Japanese, it has a sense of poetry. I mean, it's a word that symbolises a poetic setting. So English willow, from a Japanese perspective, they will immediately think a British poet by that phrase.
So, Twitter was new, you writing those poetry was new. When you combine that, that's a very different mode of communication by a British ambassador. Did anything land in those early posts that surprised you about how the Japanese had heard you or seen you?
I mean, I think what I realised was that when I demonstrated a love of and a knowledge of aspects of Japanese culture, it produced a lot of warmth and attention. And so obviously I had to do a certain amount of describing how brilliant Britain was, because that was part of my job.
Yeah.
But showing that I understood the nuances of Japan, I really appreciated Japan, that also brought a lot of support. So getting that balance right between a little bit of advertising, but also a certain amount of me personally showing that I did connect with Japan, that was quite a nice combination that was successful in terms of communicating.
Well, if I may, I'm just going to read one of your verses back to you, and I want to know what was the moment that you wrote that. From the hard earth emerge new buds, an infant voice. Do you remember writing that?
It's be honest, I can't remember that one.
That was my favourite.
when I would write them in Japanese.
Yeah.
So I suspect if you gave it to me in Japanese, I might remember it, but I can't remember.
So the book is organised by season, and each section themed around a colour. Every poem in 3 forms: Japanese, English, Romanized. That's quite an elaborate structure for the Candace tweets, right? Why that architecture?
Well, so basically the original was simply in Japanese.
Yeah.
And what happened is I would send these out, and then an old friend of mine, a Japanese friend, who's an artist, would sometimes respond with an illustration. He'd send out a tweet that was an illustration of the poem. And then towards the end of my time, somebody said, wouldn't it be good to have a book of all of these? And then I thought, well, who will read this book? And I thought probably it'd be quite good if you had, for a British person or a non-Japanese speaker, have at least the translation in English, and then the original with Japanese characters.
Yep.
And then people might like to be able to, as a British or a non-Japanese speaker, actually speak them in Japanese. And so therefore we had the Japanese romanized.
I see.
And that's why all 3 came out.
Slightly more heavier topic, the death penalty work. So March 12th, 2013, you hosted the Death Penalty Project's report launch at the British Embassy and organised a Japan Bar Association visit to London. The GBA then came out for abolition, and you said you felt quite confident that a turning point was reached. 12 years on, where is that turning?
So I think we knew this was going to be a long-running thing, and Japan is really quite an outlier on this. So certainly to be a member of the European Union, you're not allowed to have the death penalty. And the countries in the world that use the death penalty most profusely are not particularly countries you want to be associated with. So they are, Iran and China. America obviously has the death penalty in a number of states, but if you look at the trend in America, increasing numbers of states are not using it or taking it off the books. And so it felt to me and to the British government at the time that this was a way in which Japan could move towards joining the international community's view on the effectiveness or not of the death penalty. It continues to be very popular among Japanese people, the death penalty, as it has done in every country that has banned it. Almost every time a government has banned the death penalty, it still had more than 50% of public support. So governments need to be ahead of their people in taking these decisions. And it's still very popular among the Japanese people. So
I mean, you've raised, say, the geopolitical dimension of it, but like from your own perspective, most ambassadors might just choose trade or security as their main issue, whereas capital punishment would, as you said, receive no thanks from the host country, perhaps even limited backing from your own. So I'm reasoning that there must be a very strong moral conviction that you feel about it. And what do you think is guiding that moral conviction? Is it a spirituality component? Is it the suffering that you saw in Africa? Is it the works that you've read in English? Why did you feel personally so strongly about this?
So I have to say, first of all, it's clearly British government policy. So I wouldn't do something that wasn't British government policy. So it's British government policy to urge any country that has the death penalty to get rid of it.
Yep.
So I wasn't striking out against what the government policy was. I think that it's sometimes very easy in a UK-Japan setting for us to say we're exactly the same. We're so similar. We're both islands. We both love free trade. We're both allies of America, and that means you can then disregard each other a little bit. So a certain amount of grit in a relationship is a good thing. And what was very clear was that in the Japanese political and judicial system, there were people who had been unjustly killed, people who'd been given the death penalty, who'd been killed, and then it was discovered that that was a faulty conviction. And of course, with the death penalty, you can never go backwards. You can never free somebody. And I suppose I do have a very profound sense of, I think we probably all do, but I certainly feel it, real anger at injustice. And if there's an injustice, it has to be called out. And I felt that in the midst of all this backslapping, how wonderful we were, the British were great, the Japanese were great, something that you could really engage with and where there's a chance of changing society for the better in Japan, this would be a good thing to pick up.
Well, the other issue that you seem particularly passionate about is the LGBT advocacy. So in 2013 and 2014, you spoke at Tokyo Rainbow Pride as British ambassador at a time when LGBT rights were not protected in Japanese law.
Yeah.
Again, maybe I'm not understanding the context, but it doesn't seem like a neutral diplomatic act. So what kind of conversations did you have inside the FCO before you decided to take on this area of advocacy?
Well, again, it was clear British government policy that we supported LGBTQ plus rights around the world. So it was squarely within British government policy. Japan, I think, is a very tolerant place, allowing people in their private lives to do whatever they want. So it's not a difficult place to be gay privately, but it's a really difficult place to come out. And my own sister is gay, and I saw the challenges she had in coming out, and then the way her life blossomed when she felt comfortable about being out, and that the dignity of her life and the fullness of her life were just fantastic to see. And it therefore felt to me as though this was a change, rather like the death penalty, that was ripe for change in Japan. It wasn't as if I was banging my head against a brick wall. I was confident that over the next 10 years this was going to change, and that if a British ambassador could for the first time take part in something that would help support that change, it would be helpful for the LGBTQ plus community in Japan. And I think they probably had been used to being private about themselves, and this showed that there was another way of being themselves in public with the support of an international community. And so I did it, and then by the end we had the American ambassador was there as well by my last year. So it really gained momentum as it went. So I don't think I was an original in this, but I think the status of an ambassador can help change things in ways that others maybe couldn't.
I see. The other special thing of your time in Japan was that it marked 400 years of UK-Japan commercial relations, going back to William Adams and the Tokugawa shogunate in 1613. You quoted Tokugawa Ieyasu in your 2014 speech, and it's beautiful. Though separated by 10,000 leagues of clouds and waves, our territories are, as it were, close to each other. Again, that's the English literature background of you coming in for a diplomat. Did you look much into the 17th century, especially how those kind of ideologies or mentalities could guide relations in the 21st century, especially when you wrote in 2014 how UK and Japan were natural allies in a period of flow, aiming for a high tide in relations?
I mean, diplomacy is interesting because there are certain ideas that are very easy to use to help balance relationships between countries. So Japan and Britain are both islands, and it's been a long-standing metaphor that we're both island nations next to difficult continents, and we believe in free trade, and we therefore are very close to each other. And there are certainly some very strong connections between us. And this was a perfect example of using history for diplomacy. I think one shouldn't ever be too serious about it, because though this was a period where the British government, the Japanese government, set up relations for the first time, it only lasted for about 10 years. and then the Japanese government decided to throw out all the foreigners. And the British trading post realised it had gone bankrupt because its Chinese employer had stolen all the money and taken it back to China. So the real story is a lot more sort of complex, but it's a nice way of, I think history between Europe and America and Japan often starts in the 19th century, and it was really nice to have a way of taking it back to the beginning of the 17th century and to describe it as 400 years rather than 150 years. But if you look closely as a historian, it's not as dramatic, that early period. It's just rather intriguing and quaint as a period.
And on that, like you've also mentioned, for a modern diplomat, it's important to be approachable, authentic, have a bit more personality, and develop a digital personality too. Obviously, I loved your last 100 days in Japan. What was the digital strategy behind the growth of your account and how you wanted to leave your legacy towards the end of your post?
I mean, it's certainly the case that diplomacy 30 years ago was very much conducted on a relatively elite level, with foreign ministries talking to foreign ministries and politicians to politicians. And we would consistently make mistakes because we weren't getting out and about and hearing from other voices. And you know, the Iranian Revolution was a classic example of nobody saw it coming because they weren't going out and talking on the streets to people who were revolutionary. And therefore, it's now always important as a diplomat to find ways to connect with people outside government, sometimes to give your message out to them, sometimes to hear from them how they are feeling, and that digital communication is a brilliant way of doing that. During the Arab Spring, it was extremely significant. During elections in Africa, again, it's very, very significant, of ways of detecting where things were going wrong. So I think anyone now who's a diplomat has to have a digital strategy for communicating. It's one of the things in your armoury. It's not the only or the most important, but it's an important part, particularly if you're a leader, to have a presence that goes beyond an official presence.
More approachable. Anything else about the Japan? I know obviously so much has happened there. I wish I could cover more, but are there any very important things about your time in Japan that you like to keep in this segment of the recording?
The only one, I think, is that the relationship with the imperial family in Japan, and they too have no formal standing, but they have, you know, if you want to ask a Japanese person what it is to be Japanese, it's miso soup and it's the imperial family. Are the two things that make you feel very, very Japanese. And I guess if you're trying to carve a relationship with a country, then the ability to have a connection with the imperial family is really important. And representing a country that is a monarchy itself, widely respected, that was an advantage that many others wouldn't have.
So you felt it was transferable?
So it was,
even though the culture is very different?
Wonderful.
So 2016 to 2021 was another, in my view, a big stage of your career. The Commonwealth Summit and the Commemoration Review. So Chief Executive of the Commonwealth Summit Unit and the CHOGM. How do you
We
say
call it CHOGM.
CHOGM. Great. It's the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting held every 2 years, bringing together the leaders of 54 Commonwealth member states. CHOGM 2018, hosted by the UK, was the first time that London had hosted in 21 years and was attended by 49 heads of government. You led the Commonwealth Summit Unit, a 60-person team across Whitehall for 2 years, reporting directly to the Prime Minister. CHOGMs are notoriously hard to run. 54 sovereign states with vastly different interests, plus civil society, business and youth fora running in parallel, plus media, security, all over 1 week. The 2018 theme was Towards a Common Future. What was that like, given all the experiences you've now had around the world? Would that have been pretty easy?
Well, of course it wasn't at all. I mean, the great advantage was the Queen had said this was going to be her last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And I think there therefore were a lot of people who wanted to come to thank her for her time leading the Commonwealth. One of the problems were that we were in kind of Brexit Britain, and there was debate among Brexiteers that we didn't really need the Europeans because we could do all our trade with the Commonwealth, and everyone in the Commonwealth loved us. And of course it's more complicated than that. So there was all that complexity, but it was fundamentally organising a big event with lots of heads of government to be productive, to take initiatives, to continue to note that the British monarch will continue to be the head of Commonwealth even after the Queen's death, which was agreed. So it was a wonderful occasion, and it was held at Windsor Castle, which was a fantastic place to be.
Not just words, but money and commitments underneath it. What made you make that crystal clear?
Well, I think you can spend so much time running these big events that don't deliver anything. We luckily had 2 years to prepare, and the bulk of that preparation was travelling around to each country, asking them, cajoling them, forcing them to make commitments, looking particularly at issues such as plastics, looking at issues such as youth collaboration, defence collaboration, and making sure that we were not simply having a party, we were continuing the steps towards initiatives on a whole set of areas.
Yeah. And then the second part of that kind of chapter is that you chaired the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, special committee to review historical inequalities in commemoration. So the principle there is equality in death, and the findings were striking in that for various imperial ideological reasons there had been ample cases where maybe it was a collective commemoration instead of individual names, or for some none at all. What was special in my research is that the Commission accepted every recommendation in the report, which is itself unusual. So was that what was the unique difficulty of leading something like this when it had so much dimensions and historical sensitivity?
And I think the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is an extraordinary body that was set up in the middle of the First World War to make sure that everyone, whatever their religion, whatever their nationality, who had fought as part of what was then the British Empire, should be commemorated in the same way. And when you visit the battlefields in France and Belgium, what is striking is exactly that. You have Sikh soldiers, you have Nepali soldiers, you have British and Irish soldiers, you have very wealthy aristocratic military officers, you have poor soldiers, and they're all commemorated in exactly the same way. Beautifully done. And the Commission had told itself ever since then that we are brilliant at this all around the world. But the truth is that for those soldiers who died in a number of places, such as sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, the way in which they had been treated flowed from the attitudes of the 20s and the imperial ideology, and that there were therefore lots of people who had not been celebrated properly. And this report was basically our first recognition of where we'd got it wrong, and it was a determination to correct all of those problems.
Right.
And I guess I was lucky to have had a brilliant team of academics who did the research. I had the senior commissioners who basically all had a sense that this was going to come out like this and were determined that it shouldn't happen again, and were willing to put quite a lot of money in to make sure that for the following 5-10 years we worked to correct it. And so it was an important piece of work. It shows how organisations, however high their ideals may be, do struggle in some settings, and that we all carry imperial problems from the past that we keep on having to fix.
So President of Wolfson College started 1st of May 2018. How did the process begin? When did it begin?
Well, the selection process had happened the previous year.
Yep.
It began on the 1st of May with a concert of lots of musicians, and with me having to swear in front of the visitor of the college, with the presence of the ambassador of Pakistan and the ambassador of Japan there, and it was a lovely celebration, a fantastic opening day. And then my first term was really just trying to understand how a college works, what the people in it want, where the problems are, how I start going about helping.
So our great college is a graduate-only Oxford college founded in 1966 by Sir Isaac Wolfson, a self-made retailer philanthropist. One of the youngest colleges with a smaller endowment than some of the older ones, and a deliberately international postgrad focused community, currently around, I don't think this figure might be up to date, but around 800.
About 850, yeah.
Graduate students from over 90 countries. The three themes of your leadership, in my view, seem to be: first one, decarbonisation; second one, mental health; and thirdly, diplomacy. Is that a fair categorisation of your priorities? Like more policies.
Yeah, I think it probably, those are the things that I've done quite a lot on.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. So to start with, then, on the decarbonisation, we became, I think, the first net zero higher education institution achieving net zero in 2014.
Yeah, not net zero, absolute zero.
Absolute zero,
Yeah.
2024, sorry, not 2014. What did the project involve, and for an English graduate, was it technically difficult?
So what it involved, so this wonderful architecture was built in the early 70s at a time that nobody had heard of climate change, that energy was cheap, and people thought it was wonderful to put lots and lots of single glazing and big windows, and nothing was insulated.
Yeah.
And so by the time I arrived and we looked around, we could see that this was probably one of the least energy efficient buildings in the whole of Oxford. And it had become clear that that was intolerable, that we couldn't advocate for seriousness on climate change without doing it ourselves. And so we started building a programme for how you would address it. And our first thought was do it slowly over stages. But then we thought, actually that's the wrong approach. You should do it as fast as you can. And so we managed, luckily, to get a big chunk of money from the government, and we had other sources of support. And it was COVID, so nothing much else was happening. And we just, over the course of 2.5 years, completely got rid of all oil and gas in the college, triple glazing, fantastic insulation, new heating system, air source heat pumps. And so by the end of that period, we had, for the whole of the place, including all the roads, gone to zero carbon.
Wow.
Which was a complete transformation, and we still haven't heard of anywhere else that's done it. We've kind of assumed that others would be coming in behind us, but everyone is doing bits and pieces, but nobody's done it wholesale like we have.
So have you faced any resistance then? Because one of the Wolfson Honorary Fellows had called this visionary and exemplary.
Well, I think it's one of those projects that nobody disagrees with in theory.
Yep.
So we got everyone to agree in theory, and we got the money and the timing.
Yep.
And then once you start doing it, everyone who is displaced or disrupted gets upset.
Yep.
And this is where doing it quickly comes in, because you say, you agreed, we're going to keep powering through, and you just keep powering through, and people go through discomfort, but they come out the other end and they're fine. And so I think we all went through the decision making at the beginning. We all went through the discomfort. I had to leave my own house for 6 months and live in a flat up here for 6 months. But we all also came out the other end and can all share in the pride of having achieved something that's still unique.
And it's made our shuttle buses more distinct than ever.
They're all the first petrol-free shuttle buses. Yes.
On mental health, Oxford's common approach to mental health came out of a task force that you chaired in the worst weeks of COVID. Resonates with my mission for One Oxford, where the strength of our decentralized system shouldn't also be a weakness, and that the college you go to, the societies you go to, shouldn't affect your, even here, life chances, right, with mental health. 5 years on, what is working and what is still keeping you up?
So what's working is that in Oxford has always had a lot of provision for people's welfare and mental health. What it hasn't always had is a way of describing how those things fit together. And so you've had, for example, unqualified people out of an excess of consideration supporting people who should actually be with professionals. You've had low priority people being looked after by people who actually should be spending their time with those with very serious mental health conditions. So we now have a much greater understanding of how the university and colleges and the NHS and our doctors all fit together, and that there are limits, there are basic provision that everyone has to have, but there are also limits to what you should be doing before you hand a person on to somewhere else. Added to that, there is a lot of talk about a mental health crisis, which is certainly not helpful to people's mental health. There's now good research that shows that saying to somebody, we're in a mental health crisis, makes their mental health worse. And therefore the medicalisation of what is normal distress has become far too widespread. So when I was at university, we were all worried. We were all nervous about exams, nervous about relationships and breakups. That's the normal part of what life is, and there's nothing abnormal about it. And I think sometimes now people think that that's abnormal and needs to be corrected, whereas it's absolutely normal to have all those things. And what we're trying to do now is concentrate the resources we have on the people going through serious mental health problems, of whom there are too many, but making sure students feel at the centre, being the agents of their own health. And rather like if you break a leg or if you strain a muscle, you look after yourself and it will get better. If you have a mental health problem, it's not that you then have it for life. You can very often work through, particularly at universities, you can work it through and become entirely healthy again. Whereas some people can tend to believe that they're given a particular label and that's with them for life and they're disabled forever. And we do still have a very significant proportion of people in Oxford who are, quotes, disabled, and they've been given a diagnosis, but I'm sometimes questioning of whether every single one of those people is disabled for life. I think they're often going through difficult periods. They need help to get through to the other side.
What is something that about student mental health that you would suggest that I read up about, research more, or to understand, especially given my incoming role as president of the Oxford University Students' Union?
I think, there are some really simple things that all students should make sure they are doing if they're going to be successful and productive here. And these are things like, are you sleeping enough? What are your hours of sleeping? Are you eating enough? And are you doing exercise? These are not complicated, but if you're actually working all the way through the night. If you're drinking a lot and not eating enough protein, if you're never going out for exercise, you will feel terrible. And that's not because you've got a condition or a problem, it's because you're not sleeping enough and you're not eating enough and you're not running enough. And so there's some really, really simple stuff, as well as a set of social conditions that we need to look at. And I would particularly ask you to look at the phenomenon of social ostracism. And the phenomenon of social ostracism is one where a group of people believe that because somebody else is different from them or slightly weird, that they should be excluded from their community. And we know that there have been cases of suicide involving people who are behave slightly out of the ordinary, who have been socially ostracized and they've lost their life. And we need to be very tolerant of people who are unlike us, who we might want to call weird, but we have to embrace them as part of the complex society that is Oxford.
And do you feel like the postgrad community in particular is perhaps more diverse or more at risk of being socially ostracized?
I think it's a balance. So I think the graduate community is more mature and therefore has fewer of the growing up problems that undergraduates have. But it's much more international.
Yeah.
It therefore has many more people who are arriving in a strange country and a strange university for the first time and are disoriented. And it has a large number of people who bear the weight of their family expectations, having done this amazing thing of getting to Oxford, and don't give themselves the time to keep themselves healthy, to have normal growing up, and take their responsibilities to work hard too seriously. So I think there's a certain amount of getting people to enjoy themselves and not think they have to be studying or working in the lab all the day that is part of our mission.
I see. Do you feel like that other higher education leaders so far are like on your views in general on mental health, and in particular the institutional policies to address mental health? Do you feel like it's another case of theoretically people agree but practically people don't align, or do you think there are also other perspectives that you're currently grappling with?
I'm struck by the number of people who feel that they don't have enough competence to deal with a mental health issue in a student or a friend, and that somehow only a small number of people know how to deal with mental health. Whereas actually there are some very serious issues that need a professional, but there's an awful lot where the warmth of a community, the hand of a friend can actually provide the answer. And so it's making sure that a lot of staff and students feel comfortable knowing how to deal with distress, and they don't medicalise it, but they know how to help and support it.
I see. Quickly on the diplomacy point, you've previously mentioned how the Iranian Revolution was the great cautionary tale of British diplomatic listening. Is there an equivalent cautionary tale in the past decade?
I mean, Brexit for British people is the obvious one. It's not necessarily diplomacy, but it's a case of two lessons. One, the obvious lesson that siren voices saying there's a simple solution to the world's problems are wrong. There's no simple solution. But it's also a cautionary lesson that elites, liberal elites, do lose touch with what the majority of people in the country are going through, and the fact that those people may find it difficult to express their frustrations in a coherent manner doesn't mean that there's not something genuinely problematic behind their feelings.
I see. And on your Wolfson College presidency so far, what are you most proud of?
Well, I've got to say, I mean, there are things like decarbonisation and new buildings.
Yep.
Those things is great. But my first on my list of 10 priorities for 10 years that I put myself were simply maintain the spirit of friendliness among the community of students and fellows
Yep.
that Wolfson is rightly proud of. And that's not a new thing, but I spend a lot of time just trying to get to know students and fellows, make sure people enjoy their life, because they've got pressures enough given to them by their courses. And that probably, the smiling faces and the knowledge of all these students, that probably is the thing I'm proudest of.
Yeah, I think I can definitely attest to that. Like, on the one hand, I've seen you, for example, interview Reid Hoffman, one of our alumni here, co-founder of LinkedIn, ultra successful.
Yeah.
But also as an incoming student, you know, we received communication, and in the first term we had, you had made time to have call with almost everybody. And I think that's not something that every leader chooses to do because of just the demands of the job and just how many students there are, but the fact that you have role model that approachability and authenticity definitely stands out. And now I understand a bit of why that is the case, right? Maybe it's thinking back to teenage Tim, where you were a little bit shy, or moving on to Cambridge and exploring yourself, and then taking on the different roles, exploration, the personal life, the professional life, the challenges, the suffering, dealing with sensitivity, discrete environments, thinking broadly. So the dots are connecting a bit more for me. Are you ready for a round of rapid fire question before we finally
let's go for it.
Which AI model have you used the most?
ChatGPT.
Your favourite fruit?
They're very lots and lots of good. Papaya.
Papaya. That's why our Wolfson fruit box is everything, so you don't have to pick. Which is a country that you haven't been, but you actually do want to go, because you travelled everywhere?
Jordan.
What sport do you follow?
Football.
Like soccer or football?
Soccer.
Soccer
is football.
Do you have any like sporting icons who you admire?
There's a chap called Daley Thomas, a brilliant decathlon in the 1980s, who was the handsomest man alive. Daley Thompson.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is you have absolute confidence and 1 is you don't have much confidence, where would you rank your ability to swim?
8.
Cycle?
9.
Pick up a new sport?
I would in the past have said 7, but actually I've been trying unsuccessfully, so it's probably nearer 3 now.
And impromptu speech?
Speech, 10.
Of memory?
Again, the answer now is lower than it was 5 years ago. 5.
Well, there's more to remember.
5.
5. Charisma?
I think probably 6.
IQ?
7.
EQ?
8.
So you think overall you're more emotionally intelligent than pure intellectual?
Yeah.
And then if you were to not study English, what would you have studied? I guess it was law, but if it was knowing what you know now about the world and career, what would you have studied?
I mean, I now do a lot of reading history.
Okay.
So I think history probably I would have found.
History.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, second to last main question. So your wife Sarah is a psychotherapist whose clinical specialty, I believe, is intercultural marriage, migration, and expatriation.
You've done your research, you really have.
So that is almost exactly the life that you have lived together. How has Sarah's lens shaped your understanding of what diplomacy actually does to a family? a broad question where...
I mean, Sarah's always been really good at speaking directly and speaking the truth. And I think when I was younger, found it...
So she says, I expect this of you now.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. Whereas I think I have struggled to be as direct as she is. So I've learnt directness from her. I've also learnt that in any relationship, it's quite difficult to have two people with what you call hungry jobs that are all demanding. And so we've been lucky enough to have a...
So she had more flexibility.
She had more flexibility. She always worked, but always had more flexibility, including five years working, looking after our tiny children. But I think if you've got big challenges in a family, you need time to spend with other members of the family. You can't just do work.
And I guess we haven't talked much about the personal life, but as a father, have you gone through major evolutions and what they have taught you?
I mean, I think what they have done is they have kept my feet on the ground. So the great thing about children is that they have no respect for you whatsoever. And so they if ever you say anything pompous, they take you down very quickly. So it keeps your feet on the ground. And I think they also keep you curious and knowing how to have fun. And I think it's a sad truth that there are many people in their 60s who've become expert and skillful, but have lost a bit of zest for life. And I think the children around you, you never lose that zest for life.
I see. I guess final question then, or actually before final question, obviously with the goal of the legacy-worthy interview, we couldn't have covered everything, but we tried to touch on the major chapters of your life. Is there anything else that I've missed from my research, and is there anything else that you would like
Well,
to
the
add?
thing that we've missed is going right the way back, because
Yes.
you and I share living in Adelaide.
Yes.
So I, as a child, lived in Singapore and lived in Adelaide. So David, I never met you when I was there, but I loved
wasn't there.
Adelaide.
Whereabouts in Adelaide were you?
We lived in Beaumont.
Oh, Beaumont, yeah.
And then the hills above Beaumont.
Wow. And you remember much about Adelaide?
A lot. I was aged 5 till 7 or 8. So I remember a lot of just wonderful outdoor life, camping in the Flinders Ranges.
Oh yeah, I did a 21-day camp there at school where we had to go.
Right.
And it was beautiful.
Parramatta and
Yeah, it was like this without technology, and you could probably still navigate your way around Adelaide.
I've got quite a good sense of
Which school did you go to again?
Linden Park School.
Linden Park, yeah. Still one of the best schools there.
Oh, right. It's clearly improved since I was there.
When was the last time you went back?
Oddly enough, when I was taking the Queen around Australia, there was a period when I had to travel to Adelaide, and we stayed in Adelaide. So that would have been the year 2000, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a very beautiful city. Lovely people. I think it had a great sense of character and size, right, of 2 million people, so
perfect size.
You had enough of what you needed without being overbearing or overwhelming. Well, you'll always be welcome back to Adelaide, of course.
I will come back.
So last question then, you have moved between many rooms: Adelaide, Tokyo, Paris, London, Whitehall, the Palace, Islamabad, the Commonwealth Summit, now Wolfson, and many, many more. Not Jordan yet. But across all of them, A, what is one practice that you have refused to give up? And B, across all of those rooms, you would have met many people. So I think it's very fitting for your career and your interview to maybe just end on maybe a tribute that you would like to give to special people in your life.
Well, I'm trying to think of things I've never given up, and I've never given up being curious and interested, and I think that's probably one of the secrets of why I've done reasonably okay, is that every new place I want to learn about, and I don't think I've ever lost that sort of passion. People, I mean, the most amazing person I've met was Nelson Mandela, and he just had this sort of warmth and lack of any sense of hierarchy. So when I met him, it was in Johannesburg, and it was with the Queen, and she was in a room and the door opened and he came in, and normally people bow carefully and say, "Your Majesty." And so he came in, he went, "Elizabeth." And it was just so unlike all the other encounters she had, and yet you could tell she loved it because he was such a fantastic character.
Do you think that is partly leadership as well, right? We've talked about the importance of seeking dissent, but part of that might be the fact that when you rise to a position of authority, people feel like there is a barrier and there's a gap, and thereby people don't act naturally. So then when someone treats you as a more normal human being, it's actually alluding to the inner child of, or the inner human of who we are.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be completely childlike all the time. But yeah, you definitely, it's true that the more senior you get, there's this aura around you that makes you unapproachable, and you have to work even harder to be approachable. And I remember becoming an ambassador and somebody saying, "Congratulations, you'll never be wrong again," by which he meant nobody will ever tell you you're wrong unless you go out and ask for comments from people. So yeah, it is.
And even when you ask, then like, it's still hard, right?
It's hard, and people, you have to find ways of getting honesty from people, and you start to really prize people who tell you the truth, because so few people do.
So was that something that also was a skill of yours, where, say, as a speechwriter, you were actually more critical and more honest, and thereby earned respect for telling the truth?
I think probably the great thing in the Foreign Office was that in the privacy of talking to people, talking to ministers, you could be completely honest. And then in public, you have to follow the right lines and be polite and proper. When you're acting, professional acting, but in private, you are completely honest with people because they want your honesty.
Reminds me of a mindset that I think in schools, one of the leaders told me, where you need to learn when to be an optimist and when to be a pessimist. So when you're dreaming and setting goals, you should be an optimist and not sell yourself short. But when you are setting up backup plans and stuff, you need to also be a pessimist. You know, how could things go wrong?
Yeah. And I think I would put it slightly differently. I'd say that if you're looking at analysing where things are now, there's no space for optimism there. That needs to be absolutely clear about what's good and what's not good. But if you're planning for the future, and if you're thinking about the future, you have to be optimistic, because you have to lead people to believe in a better place. You have to have the vision, and that has to be optimistic. So I'm not really in favour of pessimism generally. I think realism and optimism are my two modes.
Wow. And so one final question, what are you optimistic about now?
I mean, I'm optimistic about the fact that the next generation is going to help solve all these awful problems that at the moment seem sort of insoluble. So the politics of Britain seems at the moment insoluble, climate change seems insoluble, the prospect of what's happening over the other side of the Atlantic seems insoluble. But we've had pretty awful times before, and new generations find new ways around it. So I'm optimistic those will come. I just hope it comes sooner rather than later.
Well, thank you for all your work in empowering the next generation as an educator, which I think is a very noble profession. But thank you so much, Tim, for your openness, your honesty, your leadership, and all that you've shared and continue to role model for us.
Well, thank you for inviting me and setting this up. It's a wonderful setting. Thank you.
And thank you to Nigel, of course, as well.
Thank you to Nigel.
Great videographer and photographer. Thank you.